I'd like to turn it over to our chapter president, Erica Watson-Lee, so that she can welcome you for the occasion. Erica?
Hello everyone. As Angela said, I am Erica Watson-Lee. I am the president of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, Psi Theta Omega chapter. We plan to do this event face-to-face, but of course, as you all are well aware, in the world with this pandemic, and we'd be safe, but we did not want to cancel this event. So with the help of technology and our savvy presenters and committee members, we were able to bring you this information virtually. So I hope that you gain some great knowledge from it, some benefit from it. We are also planning to record this so that we can make it available to watch later, and at that point, that is something that could be shared with others. But again, we want to welcome you. This is, especially in this time, being financially sound and making some good financial decisions is going to be to your benefit. So thank you for your schedule, and I hope that you enjoy and gain some knowledge from this.
Thank you, Erica. And like Erica said, we want everybody to stay on mute. You will have an opportunity to ask questions. You can type your questions in the chat. You'll have the opportunity to put those in our chat group, and we will poll them. And after each presentation, you will be able to, we'll get the presenters to respond to your questions. All right, so with that, first, let me just start by saying that Alpha Kappa Alpha Incorporated Psi Theta Omega chapter, under its Target 3 platform, focuses on building your economic legacy. And in order to build, you must also protect. Thus, this evening, what we planned for you is a COVID-19 style financial seminar with two dynamic presenters. We have Richard L. Allen and we have Jorge Gonzalez. We will focus this evening on budgeting now and in the future, as well as banking remotely and reviewing your credit report, as well as communicating with lender servicers. Before we introduce our speakers though, Target 3, we'd like to bring you a little message. Reviewing your family's budget should be a critical part of your coronavirus response strategy. While the federal government has passed an economic stimulus package to help Americans manage financially during this crisis, that one-time payment is only a short-term solution. Making an emergency budget for the long term can help if you're experiencing tough financial times, both now and if you anticipate a job loss in the future or a layoff. Target 3 has implemented 5 things that we'd like to share with you this evening. First, you want to start with your income and assets. Divide your budget into 2 sides, what you spend and what you earn. This will give you an idea of how deeply you'll need to cut your budget. Second, you want to categorize your budget expenses. Cutting costs can make getting through your financial situation a little less stressful. And then third, you want to also eliminate and reduce those nice to have items. If you're in disaster or emergency budgeting mode, prioritizing your expenses will matter. Fourth, you want to revisit your essential spending. Once you've cut the fluff out of your budget, you should also take a second look at what you consider to be essential spending. And then fifth, you want to spend strategically to save money. While cutting back on expenses, can make budgeting a little bit easier, we also understand that stopping spending totally is going to be a little bit difficult. So you have to think strategically about how you're going to do that. Bottom line, whether you started years ago, 2 weeks ago, or today, a budget will always make sense. How quickly you and your family's finances are being affected by the disruption of COVID-19 will depend on how you manage your finances during the crisis. If your existing budget is fundamentally changed, it makes sense to take a deep breath, consider what options are available to you now, and revise as needed. And with that, I want to introduce our speakers. First, we have Richard Allen. Richard Allen is the current Divisional Vice President and has been a dedicated member of AXA Advisors LLC since 2003. His primary focus is building financial strategies for individuals and families working in public school systems and local municipalities. His key areas of interest include retirement planning, college planning, and estate planning strategies. Richard strives to build a long-term client relationship that fulfills all aspects of his clients' financial needs, while assessing a full range of products and services to help his clients build a sound financial foundation. Richard is a graduate of the University of Florida, obtaining his bachelor's in economics. Richard has also obtained his FINRA securities registrations, Series 7, Series 66, and Series 24, in addition to life, health, and variable annuity insurance licenses. Richard completed the Harvard Institute at the University of Harvard for AXA-based training in 2013. He is actively involved in many community organizations, including Student Teach-In, National Sales Network, Orlando Chapter, and he is a sponsor for the AXA Day of Service. Richard is an Orlando native, married with one child, and from a household of parents with more than 60 years of experience and commitment in the Orange County public school systems. Our second presenter is Jorge Gonzalez. Jorge joined Regions in 2017 and serves as the Bilingual Financial Wellness Relationship Manager, Vice President in Orlando, Florida. Jorge began his banking career in Austin, Texas, and has over 14 years of experience in financial service as a trusted advisor. He enjoys identifying and partnering with area organizations to grow strong communities. In his current role, Jorge provides business and consumer financial wellness programs that help make employees financially healthier and businesses more profitable. Originally from Brownsville, Texas, Jorge and his family look forward to becoming part of the Central Florida community. So with that, what I'd like to do is to now turn my laptop over to Richard so I can start sharing. Richard?
All right, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, awesome. Well, thanks everyone for having me. I appreciate the time that I could spend here with you all to share just a little information about me, about some of the work that I do here within the community, but more importantly, maybe giving some additional information and feedback related to just the world of finance, which I'm assuming that's what we are drilling down deep into today. I'll get started here with just a little bit of information. Start with just a little bit of information about me. As mentioned, I've been with AXA Advisors, formerly now Equitable Advisors, for a little over 17 years. Enjoyed my time working in the community. When I graduated from the University of Florida, I knew that there was an emphasis for me just to educate the community about just this financial stuff. It seemed to be overwhelming. There weren't really many people, including my parents, loved ones, family members, friends, that understood this. And so I wanted to at least do my best to help with that conversation. So I ended up just focusing on really drilling down deep. My role currently is helping clients, but I also am building an impactful team that's mirroring a lot of the exercise I've done over the years within the community. Also married to a beautiful woman who's also a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Incorporated, and also a member of Kappa Alpha Psi Land Alumni Chapter here locally. So I try to plug myself in the community as best possible, but mainly just to do what we can to help out where I can. But let's get started. Let's talk about just some of the relief that's come due here lately. The CARES Act. I'm not sure how many people are familiar with this act, but it got initiated here and approved on Friday, March 27th. I wanted just to touch on some highlights here. The act stands for the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act. But there were a handful of provisions that were at least given to the general public, just assist in times like these. And I know, if not you all individually, you all may know some people going through some rocky times in terms of just maintaining employment. I think for many of us who still actively are employed, we at least are extremely blessed with what we're able to do. But I know that there have been some pinch in a lot of the different areas and industry in just various backgrounds related to what's going on with COVID-19. But with that said, over $2 trillion has been provided. And I just kind of wanted to highlight a few things here. One in particular would just be some of the unemployment state-run programs. For people that at least are trying to file unemployment, I know it's been kind of rocky in a lot of states. In Florida, I know there's been some challenges with just people getting through the process, initiating the process. But for the ones that are on the state-run side, the law is providing people hopefully you all able to see the screen. Seemed like for some reason my screen went down for a second, but I'm back up. Hopefully y'all can still see it. But yeah, the state provides an extra $600.
Your screen did go down.
It did go down, so you aren't seeing it at all? Okay.
No.
All right, let me see if I can get it back here. How about
there you
now?
go. There you go.
Gotcha. We're gonna work through this technology, I promise you. But with the weekly benefits that people are receiving, there's an extra $600 per week that the federal government is providing for benefits of unemployment. So I wanted to at least highlight that, and that's actually going to be happening until July of 2020. So later this year for the next 4 months. So someone can make at least up to extra, $900 or at least some extra, $600 a week up to July 2020. So if anyone's going through at least that hard time, I know someone that is, definitely remind them that that is allowable under the new act. Also, for people that may have just lost their jobs, or even if you're still employed, there has been some relief. I think some of you all may have qualified for the relief. They are providing stimulus checks in the amount of $1,200, and it all does depend on, quite frankly, the amount of income yourself or your household receives. So keep that in mind. Everyone won't be receiving a stimulus check, but many will. The thing about this, though, is that the retirement accounts that people have as part of this bill, you are able to access up to a certain amount of your retirement accounts, where under normal circumstances, the IRS has very strict rules related to the accessing of retirement accounts. In this case, as long as you fit one of these 3 criteria, you're okay to at least be able to access a retirement account at this time if you don't qualify based on age. The first is, you just have to have been diagnosed with the coronavirus. Secondly, you have a spouse or dependent in your household that at least has been diagnosed with the virus. And then lastly, you've just been impacted financially in some capacity, either due being quarantined, being furloughed, laid off, having your work hours reduced, just being unable to work due to lack of child care, reducing hours of just the business you own and operate, and then many other factors. So if any of those apply to you, you do have the ability to access a retirement account. Now, the numbers are like this. You're able to access up to $100,000 within your retirement accounts. And it's either $100,000 or less, of course, if your account balance is less, with a lot of different variables that apply that benefit you from a tax perspective. One of those in particular is being able to access your retirement money and then pay the taxes back over a period of time. So I'll dive deeper in that on the next slide. But another function of accessing retirement money during this COVID-19 this pandemic that we're dealing with is the ability to borrow against your retirement account. You do have the ability to take a loan of your retirement account as well, where maximum loans that were allowed were up to $50,000 by law. Now loans are up to $100,000 that are applicable under the law. And you have normally 5 years to pay a loan back. if it's tied to an employer-sponsored account. So let me explain. If you have a 401k, 403b, 457, which is also referred to as a deferred comp plan, any of those type of retirement accounts that are tied to an employer, if the employer allows for you to take loans, you do have the ability to borrow against your retirement money without the taxation involved in similar to a distribution. And you do have the ability to put the money back and restore the balance of the account over time. Normally, you have 5 years to pay the loan back. Sometimes you have, if it's for a primary home purchase, the company will allow for you to have an extended period of time to pay it back, 10 years or more. If, let's say, you have a 5 year to pay the loan back, which is standard without purchasing a primary residence, home that you live in, you do have an extended period of time to make even the first loan payment. There's an extension of the loan payments up to 1 year that you can attach to the term of the loan. So instead of 5 years to pay the loan back, you can have up to 6 if necessary, and you don't have to start making payments right away. So once again, another ability for us to access some relief in a time like this, to where if we're working under normal circumstances, the law doesn't allow for you to access retirement money except through a loan provision. But if the loan is allowed, you do have the ability to take the loan and have extended time to pay it back. But if you need access funds just for standard withdrawal, you are allowed, as long as lawyer has the ability for you to take the loan and the withdrawal. So for example, if I'm able to take a withdrawal from my retirement account right now, and I'm not retirement age of 59 and a half, which is the normal retirement age that you have to be to access retirement money from any retirement account, you are in a position to take that loan without paying a 10% early withdrawal penalty. Under normal circumstances, there is a 10% penalty that's applied for any access to retirement money if you are not retirement age. Well, now that is not going to be subject to a distribution that's related to the coronavirus. In addition to that, under normal circumstances, especially with accounts that are tied to employers, again, 401k, 403b for educators, 457 or employee deferred comp plans that for governmental employees, there's usually a 20% mandatory tax withholding that's attached to each withdrawal. That is actually being waived during this crisis. So if you do need access to funds, you do have to prove that you took a withdrawal in the eyes of the IRS. However, the 20% that is normally withheld to assist you with your taxes on that distribution, companies are not even taking that money from the distribution and allowing for you to have all 100% of the distribution be sent to you directly. Now, do you still have to make payments toward the IRS for that distribution? Well, you still do, because many of those dollars got put in those accounts without paying taxes on them when they were deposited. So therefore, the extension for paying the taxes has been extended to up to 3 years. So you have up to 3 years to make payments toward the taxation on that distribution. The taxes still have to be paid, but you do have some relief in paying the taxes over a 3-year period. So once again, another way to access funds if you need it in a time where maybe you just didn't plan properly, the budget wasn't quite ironed out yet prior to something like this happening. There is some relief. Make sure you take advantage of it, and keep in mind, whoever that you talk to for tax advice, be sure to run a lot of these different ideas past that person to see how it fits in your overall tax planning. However, these things are allowable under the new law. Now, let's just talk about what we should be doing. What can we be doing? I'm going to pivot here because really the idea behind all of the planning that's involved that we do with households and financial planning of any kind, we really need to figure out what type of approach do we need to take, and what type of approach do we need to take a look at when it comes to managing just your overall financial plan for your household. Too many times I come across people that I meet with for the first time, and they said, "Hey, Richard, I started a retirement account through my job, which is a great thing to do, but then I picked up another investment that I was, one of my coworkers told me about. I then saw something online and I invested money there and put money there, and and tried that out. And then I read about, something in the paper and started putting money in that. And over the years, they've just accumulated a ton of stuff. May have had different stops along the way with different career paths. But what ends up happening and what we call our common approach is most people end up just accumulating a lot of just different products over the years. And those products in turn really drive their overall portfolio. And unfortunately, the strategy that really should have been done first is ultimately the last thing that gets considered. So if people hit their goals, reach their goals financially, it's usually done by accident. It wasn't really intended, but unfortunately, for many people, they may not, just because it was done what we call more of it was done more on what we call a common approach. On the other hand, what we prefer to do is to really look at what we call just the actual advisor approach. As an advisor, when I'm meeting with clients for the first time, the main thing we focus on is developing the strategy first. What does the strategy need to be for us to carry out whatever the long-term goal is, or short-term goal if there's one there, to really understand how we need to build it. Once we devise the strategy, then it's a matter of us building the right type of portfolio that needs a structure to carry out the strategy. And then the products are really the last thing that we implement. Similar to a prescription that's written by a doctor. A doctor won't necessarily write your prescription first and then check you out to see what's hurting and why you showed up at the office. No, we have to take the similar approach as a doctor. We have to really structure the strategy first, and then everything else builds upon that. Now, I know the conversation is related to planning, especially from a budgetary standpoint, and that's very key, because when we're looking at what we're able to do in a household, for the most part, most assets in a strategy can be positioned into what I call the 3-bucket strategy. And generally speaking, each bucket has a different responsibility, but also each bucket has a different timeline as to when you need to touch the assets that are in that bucket. And so, generally speaking, for most people, bucket 1 is that short-term bucket. And so right now, during times like these, the short-term bucket is one that generally is going to be, for most people, the dollars that they can access extremely easily, whether they're dollars at the bank, which Jorge is going to touch on some of that, or a strategy that we built into the budget to truly set aside a proper amount of emergency savings. And for different people, emergency savings can consist of just different amounts. Generally speaking, you might hear the term of 3 to 6 months worth is what should be required. But I have clients that work in industries that may be small businesses. They might have sales as the industry that they're in, and so their income may fluctuate. And so in some months where they have better months, it's usually encouraged that we position a bit more in that emergency bucket, but then also in months where it may be a bit more lean, have a bucket to pull from to offset during those times. Also with clients I work with in corporate America, layoffs, furloughs. I had a doctor, a client of mine, tell me that he was furloughed the other day during this coronavirus. Now, whoever thought, that type of career path would have to deal with being furloughed, but it doesn't matter what your career path is, doesn't matter what industry you're in. You really want to make sure that the budget proves and consists of us putting dollars aside into a bucket that we can put our hands on right away. I can tell you that one of the strategies I personally use is every time that I get income from my employer, I've created a separate account that I don't have a checkbook tied to, I don't have a debit card tied to. If I need to access money, I actually have to drive downtown to one, or this bank that has very few locations, and either stand in line or try to see how I can access money some type of way. But I have to make it inconvenient for myself to access money out of that account. And that's really the design of really building that short-term bucket. The intermediate bucket, this is going to be one that says, hey, I have money over and beyond my savings. My emergency is when I'm not as concerned about the growth on my emergency savings. It's more about making sure I have access to monies that are liquid. So therefore, if I have maybe a short-term purchase, college funding for a child, whether it's putting money aside for at least that wedding for the daughter, you want to make sure that we position the money that may extend past the emergency bucket, but also add more growth to that account as well. And then bucket 3, this is what we refer to as a long-term bucket, long-term approach. This is money that we want to position that we give at least a little bit more access to more growth. Not as concerned about risk. When you hear that term risk and reward, well, I'm going to cover some of that here in a second. But when it comes to the risk that applies with bucket three, I'm not as concerned about that. I really want to leverage dollars in bucket three to offset the money that may be used up in buckets one and two. So if I'm truly leveraging all my buckets the right way, doesn't matter if I'm a young professional, I'm trying to build this, or I'm a retiree who's saying that, look, I need to put money away for emergencies, but maybe for my short-term retirement needs. Maybe in the first few years while I'm healthy, I have time, I have access to resources to go do the things on that wish list that I've always wanted to do, maybe travel, name it. I can be able to leverage those expenses in the early years of my retirement, but maybe bucket three, I use this bucket to help build legacy strategies, knowing that there's only two outcomes in retirement. Either I outlive my money or my money outlives me. Hopefully your money outlives you. We hope to have money that's left behind. And if so, how can we leverage bucket three to be able to create lasting legacy planning for our children, grandchildren, or organizations, or just nonprofits that we care a lot about? So all in all, those are all things that come along with the three bucket strategy. Doesn't matter who the person is, and no matter how much they have in total net worth, we can still construct this the right way and also plan for times like we're in if this is done properly on the front end. Now, let's talk about just the history of investing. I think, for many people, there's just a little bit of education that might be required in terms of how investments, or just the history of investments operate in general. I'm gonna pull this over because I think it's a little cleaner to see, but we have one of our money management partners, Lake Mason, pull together just a snapshot of what we're seeing on the news, just the stock market. I know many of you all who have current investments that you own or have been watching the news, you're seeing a ton of red on the screens and you're wondering, what should I do? Should I try to pivot? Should I change course? Should I, make some changes? Well, first of all, let's look at historically what the markets have done. Many publications, or at least, media, much of the media shows the Dow Jones and what it does every day. Well, I can tell you the Dow Jones only tracks the top 30 stocks in the country. The S&P 500 tracks the top 500 stocks in the country, and many investors look at that as a better measure of what the market does. So what we've done here is track what the top 500 stocks in that S&P 500, what they've done since 1937 up until just last year, 2019. And what we've also done is we've broken down the years of the market where they were at their worst, where they were below zero in return. And we've highlighted those in red, and we've also highlighted the years of the market when they were above zero in green. And what we see here is that even if we dissect the worst years where they were down 24% or more, 18 to 24%, 12 to 18, 6 to 12, 0 to 6, we notice that even in the worst years of the market, it only happened twice or three times. I apologize. 3 years. 1 year where it was down 18, 24%. 1 year where it was down between 12 to 18%. But the majority of the times the market was down, it was down within manageable ranges that could be more easily made to recover from. Now, in comparison, if we looked at just the total positive years in the market, and even the markets where it was up 24% or more in the year, those years, what we see is that happened 20 years, which equates to all of the negative years combined. Well, what was the biggest element to having this happen? Well, it truly was time. Time was the biggest factor in terms of what this looked like. So, for dollars that at least extend outside of bucket one, so buckets 2 and 3 referenced in the previous diagram, what we see here is that if we have the time to extend where we can leverage some of the market growth, what we have noticed is that even in the worst years in the last 20 years, it only happened 5 times. Majority of those years were up. When they're up, you don't hear as much about it. But when they're down, you hear everything about it. The other thing that we can't do is time the market. We can't be saying, Richard, I have clients that say, Richard, when should I be pulling my money out? When should I put my money in? Well, if we created the right type of strategy, the funds shouldn't be pulled out and put back in because we can't time it. And then if we do, the markets move so fast that we may miss out on valuable growth when it happens. So, for example, if we stayed fully invested during the last 20 years in the market and we had invested $10,000, that $10,000 would be worth over $30,000 today. But if we missed the top 10, just the top 10 days in the market, that 10,000 would have only grown to 16,000. We had more than we started with, but significant difference from the 32,000. Had we missed the top 20 days, 10,000 is what we see there. Missed the top 30 days, we would actually have lost money at that point. Top 50 days, top 100 days, and you can see kind of what happens there. So long of the short of it is, once we create the right strategy, build the right plan, starting with the budget items that allows for us to see what we can position in different buckets, we have to really maintain the strategy long term. And I think if we do that, we'll probably be surprised at what the results might be. So hopefully that made some sense in its simplest form. Another thing I looked at here was just over the last 20 years, what happened in those years when the markets were good? There's something that's called drawdown. Fancy term that just means even when the markets are up that year,
Okay, it looks like we lost Richard again. Okay. All
I'm
right.
bouncing back. Can you hear me at least? All right, I'm almost there.
Okay.
Sorry about it. Hopefully I'm back in business now.
Yes, thank you.
Perfect. So what we see here is that when the best markets, when they did occur, when the markets were positive, these bubbles represent the worst times within that year that we saw in the markets. So even when the markets might have been up, there was a time at its worst during that calendar year where the markets may have been down. But had we gotten out when the markets were down here, we would have missed the upside when they took place. So I just wanted to share this with you because the markets move so fast, even within a year, where we can see some of the worst results within a calendar year and still see the market rebound and end positive. So with that said, even though we're going through a tough time, it's only just April that we're in. We still have a long time left to go throughout the remaining part of this year. Who knows where the markets may finish? But I always just encourage people, let's just hang in there because we could have a rockier time that could happen within a year, but still end on the upside or positive side with how our investments perform within that same year. Who knows what next year looks like or the year after? One of my analysts sent this to me here a few weeks ago. What this represents here, and I thought this was kind of just a good visual to show you, are all the different outbreaks and setbacks that have occurred since 1930 up until this year. And mind you, this was before the coronavirus hit, so I think, I'll be curious to see what the results look like later. But you name it, the pandemics that we've gone through, Asian flu here between 1955 and 1960, the Hong Kong flu, the pneumonic plague, SARS, Asian flu, swine flu, Zika. All these things happened during the course of that timeline. But this blue line here represents just a historical snapshot of what the S&P 500 did during that period. It may not have been a straight line, but I can say that the markets went up in that trajectory. So in that case, do we need to make huge adjustments or panic or abandon our plans or plans that are set forth, strategies that are put in place? I would say, let's make sure you review it with your advisor, make sure that nothing has changed. But, the statement that I'm making with a lot of my clients is we plan for this. We plan for times like this, and we just have to fight through it. And then the last thing I'll share here was going to be related to really just making sure you're in the right type of investment mix. It's a little blurry, so I'll pull over the actual item here. But what this represents would be, I don't care what investment you're in. When I talked about the portfolio and how that should look, every portfolio that someone is in, it consists of at least one of these 5 different categories. Someone who's more conservative has more of this orange or lime green that you see here, held away from the stock market, held away from the stock investments. Very small color shades of blue there represent money in the market. The person may not be in position to earn a ton, but they are in position of risk protection, protecting their accounts against any short-term market declines. But as we go through each one of these models, what you'll see is that there's less and less orange and lime green and more blue that's shown here. What this represents is more investments being shifted into the stock market, the investments that have higher potential to perform when the markets are good. But on the other hand, if we see short-term declines, as we're seeing now,
Okay. Usually he comes right back in. So,
all right, making it back. Hopefully I can get there pretty quickly. All right, hopefully I'm back here. All right. Apologize about that, ladies. But if someone's more aggressive in their investments, they have more of this blue that you see in the photo, less of that orange or lime green. They're wanting to at least position themselves for higher growth potential. And if so, then they can achieve it when the markets are great. But when the markets aren't performing as well, we usually will see a sharper decline in those accounts. But for someone maybe in a bucket three, or for assets in a bucket three that I referred to, that person might be okay with that portion of their assets they may not touch for the next 5, 10 plus years. Okay, invested that way. My main point to sharing all this with you is that as part of any review that you may be doing with an advisor or someone that's assisting you with your overall strategies, you really want to be reviewing your tolerance for risk, making sure you're at the right levels across all of your different buckets. So once again, if something like what we're going through today is happening, it won't rock the foundation of your overall strategy. But with that said, I guess I'll just go ahead and just summarize things here. Look, things to remember and consider with just market volatility in general from what we're seeing. Just maintaining a long-term perspective rather than just reacting to what you're seeing on the news on a daily basis. Remaining focused on the big picture and making sure that your risk tolerance aligns with your portfolio, as I just mentioned. Remember that, trying to time the market. We talked about just the mistakes that can be made, even the lack of money that can be earned, or loss of money even that could take place by timing the market can be extremely difficult. So the markets perform rather quickly, and just keeping in mind, long-term investors historically see less volatility over time. But all in all, thanks for giving me some time today. Hopefully that helped, and I definitely would like to answer any questions if there are any that pop up.
Okay, currently we have 2 questions in the chat for you, Richard. It was during the beginning portion of the slide presentation. Should we be decreasing the percentage amount we are placing in retirement funds with our jobs?
You were breaking up on me. I didn't quite.
Okay. Should we be decreasing the amount of funds that we're currently putting into our retirement accounts on our job?
Oh, I got you. All right, guys. I heard it that time. Actually, the answer to that is probably just the opposite. When the markets decline the way they do, what generally happens is everything that you all are investing in on a regular basis technically is on sale. So it's kind of like going to your favorite store and seeing everything that you love on that clearance rack or sales rack. I know I'm a big fan of doing that. But when your investments decline in value, technically those same investments are on sale at a discounted price. And so for many of my clients, there are 2 things that I look at. Either A, do we increase contributions to now use those same dollars to purchase more investments with the same money, or at least a higher amount of contributions to purchase more investments? Or do we even look at shifting money that might be sitting outside the market within your portfolio and using that money to purchase those investments in a block of purchase? Yeah, I'm definitely a big fan of, if you're able to budget to add more to your contributions that you're making, definitely do it during the market's declines. And also, if you can't do it from a budgetary perspective, maybe repositioning assets into the market to at least take advantage of the market's declines would be the other advantage there.
Okay. Can you go over how our taxes will be affected next year if we receive unemployment with the additional $600 per week? Are you familiar with that?
That I'm not. So I'm not sure how that's going to be affected in relation to taxes. I know under normal circumstances, believe it or not, unemployment is taxed, but I don't remember seeing or reading anything in the unemployment increase that's being done now to where even the standard unemployment that's being taxed at the normal rate. So that one you have to ask your tax advisor for that. So, but unfortunately, I can't answer that.
Okay, and then our last question that I have here is, which would you recommend for beginner investors? I think from the last part of your presentation, you know, or if Ms. Walker can clarify. Conservative, some type of conservative.
Or maybe in terms of the models. I got you. So it really depends on the timeline as to when the funds are going to be needed. So, you know, I'm not, this is a risk that people run. And this is, I think, the reason why investments sometimes can get a bad rap is because prior to when I got into the industry back in 02, right around 02, just coming out of, you know, 3 down years in the market. And then we had the Enron crisis and all that stuff take place right before then. And what was happening is people were really investing the wrong type of money into the markets. So, for example, there were many people who had horrible stories where they were nearing retirement, maybe a year or two away from retirement, and they were taking retirement money, all of it, and investing it into the stock market. And the markets declined drastically. So I'm really one of the people putting grocery money in investments.
Richard, can you hear me?
Go at least further down the road, and we can be more aggressive with the models that we work with if the timeline is long enough to allow for us not to need to touch them. So with a younger professional, if these are dollars that you don't need right away, that we can stand to do without for quite a while, then that aggressive model would be the one, or close to it would be the one that I would be encouraging us to take a really good look at to allow for us to take full advantage of the markets today.
Okay. Thank you. Let's see, we have one more question. Looks like, if you invest in the stock market, would you have to pay taxes from what you earn?
Good question. I can do a full conversation about just the different types of products and the taxation on those. I won't get into too much detail, but it all depends on the tax law that we use for the investment. I kind of look at just investments as furniture in a house. The house is the actual tax law. So the laws are really what govern how dollars are taxed. The investments that go inside of that tax law, inside of the house, so to speak, those could be anything. A savings account could be viewed as a retirement account at the bank, because it's you might have stocks that sit outside of the tax law that allow you to touch them whenever you like to. So, like I said, it depends on the tax law that we use for the investments that determine what the taxation is. But there are really only 4 areas that investments of any kind can truly be taxed.
Richard, can you hear me okay?
I can cover another time.
Richard, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Okay. The connection that we seem to have with you is like really bad. So what I would suggest is that we're going to stop this part of the presentation here. But if we have additional questions, we have supplied Richard's information. He does this for a living, and so he takes clients. And also, we'll be having another one of these. Hopefully, we can have it live in the fall. We'll look at planning that. But Richard has been a consistent partner of ours, and I want to thank Richard for giving us the time to share his knowledge. So thank you, Richard.
No problem. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. I enjoyed it. Thank you.
So are you going to be able to stay on till the end, just in case we have more people might think of some things later on?
Yes, I will. I'll be available.
Okay. All right. Thanks a lot, Richard. If you could stop sharing your desktop so then Jorge can take over. Thank you so much.